Crime is sexy.
Is there a fate worse than death? Is there a scenario where a criminal would gladly choose capital punishment over life in prison? As surreal as it sounds, there are prisons in this world that make the death penalty a merciful sentence. Prisons riddled with unspeakable horror that would make your stomach turn. In this video, I'm going to show you 10 of the worst, so take a deep breath because things are about to get very ugly. If you want to enjoy more cool videos like this, hit that subscribe button. Let's jump right in. Number 10. Black Dolphin Prison in Russia. Ask any Russian you know, and they will tell you that life in any Russian prison is incredibly tough. But this high-security Black Dolphin prison redefines that quality. Located on the Kazakhstan border, Black Dolphin is one of Russia's oldest prisons, and it got its name from the statue at the front of the building, which the prisoners built themselves. That's strange, because the Black Dolphin is not really known for its freedom. In fact, the only way to escape this prison is by dying. That is the fate of every inmate, because only inmates with life sentences are sent to Black Dolphin. The prison houses about 700 inmates who together have a murder count of about 3,500 shared equally. That's at least 5 victims per inmate. But murder is not the worst skill on their resume. Black Dolphin also houses cannibals, assault perpetrators of the worst kind, maniacs, terrorists, and pedophiles. 2 inmates are forced to share brutally built 50-square-foot cells that are secured behind 3 sets of steel doors, and these cells are under 24-hour surveillance, and guards make their rounds every 15 minutes. The prisoners hardly ever leave their cells, bent over the waist and blindfolded so they can't. But when they do, they're blindfolded and made to walk bent at the waist so they never have a sense of their surroundings. There is no prison yard and no cafeteria, as inmates are forced to eat only meals of soup and bread in their dingy cells. If hell was a prison, then Black Dolphin would be a strong contender. Number 9. Barrios, El Salvador. Now, what could be worse than hell? I'm glad you asked. Allow me to introduce you to Aldiki Udad, the most dangerous prison in all of El Salvador. The reason it's so dangerous is because it houses 2 of the world's most notorious gangs, the MS-13 and the Barrio 18 gang. Death often comes without warning if an inmate is not a gang member, and that's why from 2004 to 2015, only gang members were sent to this hellhole. But sometimes being a gang member is not enough, and most of the time, they're the least of your concern because the living conditions are so bad and the prison is so overcrowded that getting simple things like food to eat or a place to lay your head could easily turn into a fight to the death with anyone contesting your claim. The prison's reputation for lawlessness and violence is so real, the prison guards are terrified of entering the prison, and the result, the entire prison system is run by the gang members. Number 8. PETAK Island Prison in Russia. It's called the Alcatraz of Russia for a reason, and that reason would put the fear of Mother Russia into the heart of the devil. Fire Island, the island of the damned, sitting in isolation on the vast Nosavaro Lake. This tiny island prison houses 193 prisoners, all on life sentences. Unsurprisingly, the inmates are usually the worst of the worst. They're looking for anything that can be used as a weapon or a means of escape, and each of them are kept in a small 2-man cell for 23 hours every day. Escape is impossible because inmates are not even allowed out of their cell for any reason, and the 1 hour they are allowed out of lockdown is spent standing in a cage that they can barely pace in. However, the cherry on this terrible reality, what makes this prison worse than Black Dolphin is the lack of basic sanitation facilities. There are no proper toilets and no proper bathrooms. Inmates do their business in a steel bucket and they find sleep on thin beds. Some have likened the living conditions of Bedok Island Prison to that of a zoo in winter. That's because the island is surrounded by freezing waters that contribute to breaking the spirit of their inmates. Number 7. Bangkwang Prison in Bangkok, Thailand. Bangkok Prison is one of the worst prisons on earth for a very specific reason. Many of its inmates were once tourists. On the 24th in the room, which is really hard, especially just to get to the toilet because everyone's all over them, and because the prison facility is so overcrowded because of the government crackdown on drug trafficking. These offending tourists have to cramp up in the same space with prisoners on death row, and the offenses that could boot you into Bangkwang are often very trivial. Reading the wrong book, staying in groups of 5, or even eating a sandwich in public could get you a one-way ticket to Bangkwang. Life in Bangkok is beyond harsh for inmates. In the first 3 months of their sentence, new inmates are required to wear iron chains. To make matters worse, the food they're served is often infested with maggots, and drinking water is an absolute luxury. But it doesn't end there. Don't think you can just avoid bang quang by being a good citizen or tourist. A couple of years ago, a British man was thrown into jail when a Thai gang jumped him, and even though he lost an eye and suffered injuries, he still had to do time in Bang Quang for fighting back. Number 6. GITARAMA Central Prison in Rwanda. Overcrowding is a common denominator with most prisons on this list, but there is no prison that has it as bad as GITARAMA's Central Prison in Rwanda. God is intolerable today. It's holding 8,000 in a facility originally designed to hold just over 1,300 inmates. 8,000 prisoners have been forced to share the space. In most cases, finding a spot to lie down on the ground is a luxury, and many inmates are forced to stand up all day or negotiate with those who have claimed portions of the ground. And it's not like the ground in dispute is some piece of fine real estate. It's damp and more often than not filled with raw feces. Unsurprisingly, this has led to more, what's the word again? Let's say complex issues. Many prisoners have outright died from disease and suffocation, and to mistakenly injure your foot would mean gangrene would set in, and you would either have to cut it yourself, risk death, or watch it fall from your body. But it gets worse than that. There have been several cases of inmates feasting on each other out of hunger, and the cannibalism could even be worse than I just stated, because there is little to no documentation on the activities that happen behind these prison bars, and prison guards have been brainwashed to believe that the prisoners in their charge are subhuman. Last year, 2,000 people died in Rwandan prisons, and an overwhelming majority of those deaths happened within the walls of GITARAMA's Central Prison. Number 5. KAMITI Maximum Security Prison in Kenya. What makes this prison immediately stand out from the rest is that it's home to the worst of the worst. Built in 1954 by its British colonizers, the prison was modeled after an old-style colonial system to house offenders during a state of emergency declared in October 1952. Today, it still has its original gallows, and it has gotten even more hellish than it was more than half a century ago. On one hand, it's an overcrowded prison that should house 1,200 inmates, as almost 3,000 inmates are crammed within it. On the other hand, this overpopulation has spread to several viral diseases like HIV and AIDS, syphilis, tuberculosis, and a whole plethora of diseases that ordinarily should be under control. Even worse is the unending unrest and corruption that plagues the prison system. Since the prison is the government's favorite dumping ground for political dissidents, much of the population is uneducated. This, in turn, has led to a telephone for ordering within the prison system, where scores of prisoners defraud innocent Kenyan citizens of their money outside the prison walls. KAMITI Maximum Security Prison is a cesspool of chaos, and only the smartest, the bravest, and the most ruthless can survive behind its walls. Number 4. Guldani Prison, Georgia. The notorious Guldani Prison in Georgia has a legacy of terror and violence that continues to haunt its former inmates. In 2012, a former prison guard who had become a whistleblower released a video documenting the horrors of Guldani Prison. The footage is too graphic to show, but it revealed the kinds of atrocities that inmates had endured for decades. Every night, random inmates were routinely sodomized with broom handles and beaten, drowned, and burned. Bones were purposely broken and teeth were damaged. In the 21st century, one former inmate recalled, "They tore off my fingernails, damaged my skull, broke my leg bones, ribs, nose, and teeth. I'm 43 years old, but I look like an old man. I often fall down while I'm walking." Today, authorities say that Guldani Prison is much improved and that the violence has been brought to a halt, but few are willing to put this claim to the test. Number 3. Mendoza Prison, Argentina. Mendoza Prison in Argentina holds the 90 most dangerous convicts in the country in its Pavilion 5, but even the prison guards are afraid to enter that section of the facility. Meals are left at predetermined spots around the door of this section, and the prison is severely overcrowded. 1,600 inmates are housed in a facility designed for only 600. There are no beds, and prisoners are forced to sleep on the floor, where they're often subjected to random, intense, and frequent torture. Toilets are non-existent, and prisoners are forced to defecate into plastic bags and urinate in bottles. The corridors are filled with a sewer of garbage, human waste, and slime. In protest of these conditions, some prisoners have sewn their mouths shut. The food is sludge, and those who are not strong, fast, or smart enough often go hungry and die under mysterious circumstances. Number 2. The ARABAKIR prison, Turkey. The ARABAKIR prison in Turkey was at the center of one of the most abusive regimes in the country during the 1980s and 1990s. Thousands of Kurdish men and women were subjected to horrific forms of torture and were left with no hope of ever getting out. Today, conditions have not been improved. Prisoners are still beaten, violated, maimed, and forced to eat excrement and are electrocuted by their genitalia. Toilets are still non-existent, the food is sludge, and prisoners are still forced to salute the prison director's dog, participate in random mock executions, and bathe in the sewers. Number 1. Camp 22, North Korea. Camp 22 in North Korea is not one prison, but rather a series of identity prison camps containing up to 200,000 prisoners. Conditions in the camp are some of the worst in the world, and many prisoners have compared them to the atrocities experienced by Jews during the Holocaust. Inmates are fed a sludge of cornmeal and cabbage every day and must supplement their diets with rats and insects in order to avoid dying of malnutrition. Rats have become so essential to the prisoners' diets that they have gone extinct in the camp. On average, 20 to 25% of the prison population dies every year. In addition to starvation, inmates are subjected to physical torture, psychological assault, and random mock executions. Little girls born in the camp are often fed to dogs to train them to be more vicious, and pregnant inmates are tied to a tree, the fetus cut from their stomach and shot. A few survivors of Camp 22 have described it as a place where death is an escape and living means never-ending suffering. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.